Who do you tell? And what do you tell? Because you really don't the fuck know. Welcome everyone to my shadow work series called Real Monsters. Hopefully you guys have had the opportunity to check out the introductory video. If you have not, I implore you to go ahead and check that out because it has some warnings and it actually prefaces what this vlog series is about. But if you have not and you really want to see this video first, I'm going to preface it here. This video series, or vlog series should I say, is about my deep, intense, advanced shadow work. It's about me telling my story, finally getting my story out and giving people an understanding of me and who I am and the monsters that I have encountered throughout my life. Hence the title, Real Monsters. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into the video. So imagine growing up and you are under the rule of what happens in this house stays in this house. Now, what happens if the infraction or the violation happens outside of your house? Does that rule still apply? Because technically it didn't happen in the house. So do you tell still? Or is it something that you keep inside because don't everybody need to know our business? See, that's the problem with that damn rule. What happens in this house stays in this house, because a child doesn't know exactly when to share, when's a good time to share, what to share, or the circumstances around what's supposed to be shared and what isn't. So let's talk about it. So we had moved. I'm going to start this episode, we're starting from my childhood and we're going to go on in chronological order as best as possible. Like I said, as best as possible because some things overlap with people and things like that. And I will be changing the names of people in this episode. So the people's names are not the real people's names. So don't be going over there looking, or don't be going looking for said people because it's not the real name. Okay, so we had just moved into a brand new housing development and we were one of the first few people in that development. That development was a development of literally brand new homes, single family homes being built, and it was a suburban neighborhood for that area, right? And so everybody would say, oh, you grew up in a nice house, you grew up in a suburban neighborhood, da 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 da. True, but that's not to say that things don't happen in suburban neighborhoods. You don't expect it, but things don't necessarily go smoothly all the time in suburban neighborhoods. Actually, that's kind of where you find a lot of infractions happen because people let their guard down in nice neighborhoods, right? So I'm about 7.5, 8 years old, and I meet some new friends in the neighborhood. And they were really, really cool people. The child that I was playing with was about, I want to say about 4 to 5 years older than me. So, and the other children that they had in that household were younger than me. So I really didn't play with the younger kids because they were so much younger than me. I played with the older one. And like I said, we were new in the neighborhood, so there weren't many families in that neighborhood, okay? So there wasn't many people my age that I could play with. And she was around going towards middle school age. So, you know, my parents was like, okay, well, you know, my daughter is mature, so, you know, she can, you know, handle her own. She can, you know, have this older friend. Well, I used to go to their house all the time, and you know, we used to play all the time, but it used to be when I used to go over there, I didn't necessarily go over there just to play with the older girl. I went to just play, period. You know what I'm saying? To play with everybody. And it ended up always being an instance where the younger two would always end up being elsewhere, and I would find myself alone with the older one. And then it got to the point where the older one would start to do things that, you know, I didn't know were not necessarily appropriate to do. Because when you grow up, sometimes you don't necessarily get taught stranger danger. I don't remember having that conversation with my parents of stranger danger, or, you know, being touched inappropriately, or somebody, you know, touched you inappropriately. We always had that big trust within our family. Our family was super close knit, and I believe around this time, my parents were starting to get heavily into the church. I grew up as a preacher's kid, so I can't necessarily remember exactly when my dad started his journey in ministry, but I know I was really, really young, because all I remember is being in the church all the time. So it's kind of crazy. I think this is kind of like while my dad was kind of like in seminary, and he was doing, you know, his thing to become a minister. So we were home a lot. And I was home with my mom, and my mom let me go outside, blase skip. So again, I was always going over their house. I would find myself always randomly somehow, and it didn't necessarily click to me until really now that, you know, she would always isolate me from the other two. So I didn't necessarily know how that always happened. I didn't necessarily know exactly what she would always say when, you know, she would have them go elsewhere. But we would always be in her bedroom, and she would always, you know, touch me down there and in different places, and kiss me and things. And I'm so young and innocent. I don't know what's going on. I don't know that this is right or wrong. I don't know anything. And so I take it as, I'm thinking that we're just playing. I think this is just, I guess, house or something that we're playing, but we're just playing. I don't know what the fuck kind of game it is. I'm a freaking kid. I'm 7.5 years old. It's not really clicking to me that this is not right, because those conversations were not had. And you don't really necessarily have these conversations. When I was growing up, you didn't necessarily have those conversations until somebody started acting out, or it was suspected. You know what I'm saying? Some things were, suspected. That's when those conversations were had. Other than that, those conversations weren't really prevalent, right? So I wasn't one to be exposed to those type of conversations. Therefore, I'm not exposed to the knowledge or the wisdom that this thing that is happening to me shouldn't be happening. This is too grown up of a situation for me to be finding myself in. And so I thought it was just playing. I thought, I met a new friend, and so I continued to go over there. And I don't really know necessarily why. I actually do. Because this started happening over the course of a few years. This happened, I believe, over the course of like maybe about 3 years. So I was about 10 when I started to really understand, like, this is not okay. First of all, I'm not gay. I don't like females like that. And this is not necessarily something that is supposed to be happening. This is not right. And I'm not comfortable anymore now that I understand and I realize. And I think what happened was schooling and starting to get an understanding and starting to speak with friends, because friends will start to tell you about things that your parents don't necessarily tell you about. And sex being one of those things. And I started to realize that that's what was happening. But I'm not going to say smart enough. I had enough of that what happens in this house stays in this house to understand that when something is not right and you understand that something is not right, you keep it to yourself. And that's what I did instead of telling my parents. I should have talked to my parents. I should have told my parents what was going on. But how do you articulate something that you don't even necessarily know what's happening yourself? How do you articulate something that you're not familiar with? These are uncharted territories. Your parents didn't necessarily tell you about stranger danger or when people touching you inappropriately. You're not necessarily putting those two, and you have such an innocence about you because at this time you're starting to evolve into being this kid who's growing up in the church, like solely in the church. So, and my parents didn't necessarily let me go to too many people's houses. And that's why I was surprised that like they allowed me to go over their house. You know what I'm saying? Because I was always in their house. We never played outside. It was always in the house. And it was crazy because this particular family liked playing outside. So it was weird, like that we were always in the house playing. So again, it wasn't something that I necessarily registered as something is wrong. This is not right until I started learning things from my friends. And then, you know how people make fun, oh, you gay and you da-da-da-da, and you didn't want to be labeled that because again, you're not, there's so much that's going on in your head. Like you're starting to learn about certain things. You're not necessarily sure about what's happening to you. You don't know how to articulate it. And then there's also a thing of what happens in this house stays in this house. And technically it's outside of school. So you're not supposed to be discussing stuff that happens outside of school. So it's like, who do you tell? And what do you tell? Because you really don't the fuck know. And then to make matters worse, it's a female doing these things to you. It's not a male. It's not like it's somebody penetrating you. It's not like that. She was literally scissoring, like literally scissoring. So it's not like I was being penetrated. So when my mom took me to the doctors, my hymen wasn't broken or anything. So it's not like you could tell I was sexually active or anything like that. So, and do you necessarily consider that sexually active? And to this day, I still don't fucking know. You know what I'm saying? Like I still have so many fucking questions. I didn't learn that this scenario was me being molested until I started talking with my counselor, who I started going and counseling with it was either 2011, 2012, around that time frame. So when I really started unpacking like everything, like the nitty gritty and all the stuff that I hid, like I've gone to counseling and therapy, and therapy and counseling was mostly for my postpartum depression. It was about being a new mom and different things like that. It was not necessarily about dabbling into childhood traumas and things like that. Now we talked about like stuff in the present moment, and I was staying with my parents at the time that I was going through therapy and stuff. So of course I would bring my parents into having sessions with me, but we never talked about childhood traumas. We never talked about things that happened to me as a fucking child. I didn't get a chance and an opportunity to talk about those things until I was an adult and I felt comfortable enough to actually open up to somebody and talk to somebody about it. And it's funny because you're actually going to see that actual counselor that I opened up to. She's going to be in the series. So when I actually opened up to her and I told her about my childhood and I told her the things that happened in my childhood, she stopped me and she said, "Oh my God, did you realize that you were molested?" And I said, "Wait, no, because when you're molested, it means it's usually a guy that he's penetrating, it's sex, and it's usually an adult, somebody who's 18 or older doing it to a child." And she was like, "Oh, honey, where did you get these definitions? Where did you get your definitions from?" And I'm like, I got them. It's just something that I picked up along the way. It was just me having my own understanding, not necessarily going to Webster's like I should have, or not necessarily really doing the research like I should have. It was just kind of me learning, picking up things as I would hear about different cases and different scenarios. And so I figured growing up, or I figured as I started to learn about it, that it meant that it was an adult doing these things to a child. Mainly it was a male adult doing these things to a child, whether it was a male or female child. Not thinking that you could be molested by females, because it's uncommon that you hear about it, right? But it's also uncommon that you hear about children doing these things. And she said to me, no, baby, you were a child. And she was of adolescent age, going into her teenage years. If she wasn't already in her teenage years, she knew what she was doing, but she was uncomfortable with her own sexual prowess and her own sexual energy, that she didn't necessarily know how to handle herself when it comes to experimenting and when it comes to figuring these things out about herself, you know, self-exploration, right? And so I ended up getting caught up in the mix, and I ended up there ended up being created some type of trauma. And the reason that I kept going back, that I learned that I kept going back, was because it created a trauma bond. It created a trauma bond. And as a child, and you're unsure, you don't know, you've never had these types of discussions, you thinking that we're friends, like we're being really good friends, and we're playing, and if I don't do certain things, she's not gonna like me, so I'm just gonna go along with it because she's older. And me putting trust in somebody being older than me and knowing better, you know what I mean? And so it was one of those things. I did not know that I was molested as a child until I started to unpack these things through counseling. Okay, and we're going to talk about another instance, because it happens right after I stopped going over to her place, because like I said, now I'm really into boys. I'm coming into my own. I'm coming into talking to boys and really being interested in boys, and females don't interest me at all. They've never interested me. You know, I just thought that I was being a good friend, and you know, I just thought that this is how people play, and I was totally oblivious. Okay, I'm willing to say I was naive as a child. There was, again, a pure innocence about me, because I'm raised up and wrapped up in the church. Like I'm starting to be, you know, in the church and being molded in the church, and having these I'm having trust that wasn't necessarily earned, that was freely given. Okay. And even when trust was broken, I didn't realize the trust was broken, because I didn't realize the type of situation that I was in, because developmentally, I'm not there. I'm not old enough. I'm not mature enough developmentally. Okay. So that's the ages from about 7.5 to about 10 years old. So we get to about 10, 11 years old. Oh, I'm feeling myself now. I like boys. I'm kissing boys. I'm talking to boys on the phone, and I shouldn't be. I'm not supposed to be. I'm being a little sneaky. I'm sneaking around. I'm starting to smell myself. I'm starting to feel myself. And at this time at home, there are things that are going on. My dad's not in the house because he's either at seminary or he's involved in some part of something in the community. My dad was heavily in the NAACP, St. Mary's chapter. He was heavily in the Boys and Girls Club. He was a mentor in the Boys and Girls Club. So my dad was out of the house, always in the community helping out others, right? And so daddy wasn't always doing right out in the community. And so my mom was chasing after him and trying to figure out what he's doing. So I have room to be sneaky, okay? I have room to be sneaky, and I'm not sharing anything that my parents haven't shared. My dad shares his story all the time. With him being a pastor, he shares his stories all the time. So I'm not necessarily sharing things that, you know, my dad hasn't spoken on, okay? So I'm not exposing anybody's business, right? Yeah. But anyway, I'm telling my story, okay? Shit. So I am 11 years old, and technically I'm too young to be getting a summer job, but they made an exception for me to be a junior counselor this year. Okay. And they made an exception because my sister was a senior counselor. And the only reason they made an exception is because I think my parents was really like, all right, we want, my daughter, we don't want her being home by herself, because I think my brother was gone or working or something like that. And I think my brother was gone living with his Aunt Linda at the time, because my brother was back and forth. He was a problem child. He was a problem child. So there's a lot going on, right, in the household. So you have my brother going, I think he was staying with his Aunt Linda at the time, because my dad and him always kept bumping heads. My sister, she was always doing her own thing, right? So at this point, I think it was during the summer, and my parents did not want me home by myself. So they were like, well, see if she can either attend the camp or she can be like a junior counselor at the camp. So they put me on as a junior counselor at the camp. So it was cool. They put me on as a junior counselor at the camp. And so I'm 11, and I'm about to be 12 after the summer is over. So yes, I am 11. And I meet this guy, and I don't necessarily think he's attractive, but he's an older gentleman, of course. And look, now I'm starting this cycle of older, right? He's an older gentleman. He's about 15, 16 years old. He's about 15 years old. Either 15 or 16, one of the two. But I know he was in his teenagers. I know he was either 15 or 16. He was not younger than 15. And I'm 11 now, 11 going on 12. Okay. And so he takes interest in me, and I think the reason he took interest in me because he knew everybody else, and I was the new kid on the block. And so it was just like one of those things that everybody was like, oh boy, like, girl, be careful. You know what I'm saying? And I was just like, okay, whatever. Getting myself into another situation that I, number one, didn't have no business getting myself into, and being too advanced for me. I didn't know, like, I didn't know what I was about to embark on. And so, we're in this thing, and we're calling each other boyfriend and girlfriend. And I know damn well I should not be talking to no boy that is 15 years old. He is in high school at this point, right? And so I'm starting to learning more about him. And he tells me that he just had a baby. And I'm sitting here like, oh my God, like, I'm a stepmom now, like, dumb shit. Like, you know how you are as a child, like, dumb, stupid shit. Like, I'm a stepmom now. Like, how the fuck I'm a stepmom? Like, that was dumb. But anyway, and so, like, I was like, oh, welcome the baby with open arms and this, that, and the third. Like, I was too advanced, too grown for my own good. But I didn't know that, those 2 or 3 years prior that I was engaging in the molestation, that these things were starting to grow me to be older and far more mature than what I was ready for, than what, I really was. And so that's how I ended up finding myself in this position here. And so we're talking, and he's doing things, and I'm uncomfortable, but I'm going with it because it's like, I think I'm in love with this guy. You know what I'm saying? I think that, I have strong feelings for him. I don't know what true love is. I haven't experienced it, but I think this is what he's telling me, that, he loves me and this, that, and the third. So I'm like, oh my God, this is love. Oh, I'm in love. I'm grown. And this is when I really said, oh my God, I'm a grown woman. I was sneaking out of the house at night to meet him. I would sneak out either through the basement window or just through the basement door. I could configure the basement door so where we had an alarm system, but my parents didn't turn it on. But they could hear when you open the door in the basement, it go. So I figured a way to open the door without the alarm thing going. So I would sneak out through the garage mainly, But if I couldn't get out through the garage because I don't know, for some reason, it was easy to get out through the side window in the basement because it didn't have a screen. So I could just get out through the side, climb over the couch and get out the side. So I was finding myself, you know, sneaking out and meeting with him at night. And then there was this one night where I snuck out and we met so there's a back path, and I live right next to Chancellor's Run Regional Park. And there was a back path that you could go to that led from Hers Estates that we kind of created. It led from Hers Estates to the Chancellor's Run Regional Park. You would come out at the bottom of the hill. You have to go up the hill and you'll be at the teen center, and then, you know, whatever. So we would meet where the trees that separated the housing development from the regional park. Well, somebody lived there as well. So somebody lived like in where the trees were, but their housing entrance was from the road, so you couldn't see. So we were in their backyard, but there were trees, so they had to kind of like come out to see us or whatever. So we were back there, and he had a blanket. I don't know where the fuck he got the blanket from, but it kind of tells me that he premeditated this shit. And we were out there, and he laid the blanket down, and we sat down on the blanket, and we started kissing. And of course, you can understand where it leads from there. I lost my virginity at 11 years old to a 15 or 16-year-old boy. And as I was unpacking all of this through counseling, she was like, "Oh, girl, he was grooming you. Like, he was grooming you. Like, he was telling you, you know, he loved you, and he was saying things to get you to do things or get you to feel a certain way, to coerce you to do certain things." And I never, being that young, and again, not having these types of discussions and not having these conversations, my parents didn't have these conversations with me. I wish they did, but they didn't. We didn't really talk about sex until my mom found out I was having sex. And that was in middle school. And I was being taken to the ER. And I think I was having symptoms where she felt like I could have possibly been pregnant. But there was also an instance where there was chocolate on my floor. And she knew I don't eat chocolate like that. So she was like, "What the hell? Where the fuck did this chocolate thing come from?" And so she forced me into telling her that I was having sex in middle school. But this was like literally a few years after I actually lost my virginity. So of course that night I'm hurting. Like, it hurts. I'm hurting, and I'm walking back in the dark, walking back to the house, and I'm like, oh my God, like, he really loves me. Like, I'm thinking like, okay, he truly loves me because we just had sex. He truly, truly loves me. And again, I know what sex is now because I've learned different things from friends and seeing different things on HBO at night and stuff when you're not supposed to be watching it and your parents are asleep and they got that nasty shit on HBO, that HBO After Dark shit. Yeah, that. And I ain't talking about that Comedy Central Comic View because that used to come on HBO too at night. But I'm talking about real sex. I'm talking about that show and shows like that. Y'all know what I'm talking about. If you grew up in the 90s, you know exactly what the fuck I'm talking about. So I knew about sex in that way. I knew, that I felt like I was under the premise that sex was between a boy and a girl. And you know what I'm saying? So I wasn't privy to the whole homosexual, even after being molested by a girl, I'm still not, the homosexuality thing is still not clicking because it wasn't a prevalent thing. It wasn't a prevalent conversation. It wasn't something that was, I'm not going to say an agenda. I'm not going to say it wasn't something that was pushed. Okay. It wasn't something that, I was privy to because I am not part of the community. I'm straight. I'm a straight female. So I'm boy crazy, right? So sex is between a man and a woman. And that's all I've ever seen. even seeing the shows that I'm not supposed to watch. That's all I had ever seen. So that's all I attributed it to, right? So I'm walking home after my first time and I'm like, I'm a woman now. Like, I had sex now. Like, he loves me. I'm a woman. And like, I'm official. Like, that's all I kept saying. I'm officially a woman. I'm officially a woman. I'm officially like, and I now that I think about it, I sound so fucking stupid, but you don't know what you don't know as a fucking kid, you know what I'm saying? And growing up too fucking fast and getting yourself caught up with too fast or too mature situations, you just don't fucking know, right? So we have sex often, and it's in the playground, it's at the playground and this, that, and the third, and we don't stop going, meeting up with each other and stuff until one day we met up at the park and my father was looking for me, and he ended up looking for me at the regional park. I think somebody told him that I was going to the park because I think one of my friends knew that I was at the park. That was my best friend at the time. I think she knew that I was at the park because she knew all about the boy. And so I saw that black pickup truck rolling around that motherfucking circle in Chances Run Regional Park, and I'm at the playground, right? I'm at the playground with old boy, right? And so I don't even know, like I don't see him until it's too fucking late. So I'm like, yo, that's my dad. Like, stay here. So I walk out of the playground and I try to hurry up and get towards the teen center so I can get cut through the teen center, go out the back of the teen center, go down the hill, cut through the pathway before my dad see me. My dad knew, he saw me, and I don't know if he saw, he had to have seen me come out of the playground, and he had to stop to go to the playground first because I ended up making it to almost to the fucking hill. And had I gone in the teen center, because I knew he slowed down. I think so he slowed down and he stopped. I saw him stop, talk to the boy, because the boy ended up starting to walk out of the playground too when my dad was coming through. Dumb! So my dad stopped him, and I guess my dad asked him if he was with me. I don't know what was said, but I know my dad spotted my ass when I got close to that motherfucking teen center and hauled ass towards me. And I don't know if I got in a truck with him or if I walked all the way home, but I got the ass whooping of my fucking life that day. And that day, that's when they realized, like, I was sneaking and talking to boys and this, that, and the third. And like, when I say I got the ass whooping of my life that day, I remember standing in the kitchen, and I always tell people about, I never tell them exactly why he hit me, but I remember standing in the kitchen. I had glasses at the time. I remember we had a split foyer. So of course there's the front door, and you have the choice of either going down to the basement or going up the steps, and the kitchen was right there. So it was split foyer. And I was standing in the kitchen. I'm in the kitchen. And my dad hits me in my face so hard. He knocks my glasses off. And when I finally found my glasses were in the basement. He hit me so hard, my glasses flew, and I guess it hit the door and bounced to the bottom of the steps in the basement. I got my glasses was all bent up, and it was crazy, but I got the ass whooping of my life that day. And I believe I had to stop talking. Well, I'm not gonna say I believe I had to stop. I know I had to stop talking to him after that incident. We tried to sneak it, and we snuck for a little while until I found out he was fucking on my cousin. And my ex-best friend was the one taking her over to their house, because my ex-best friend was fucking his brother. And when I couldn't go, because my parents started catching on to shit, when I couldn't go with her to the library, because they lived right across the street from the fucking library, when I couldn't go to the library anymore or as often, she took my cousin with her, and my cousin started. And so that's when I stopped. I really stopped. I'm now that I think about it, I'm grateful for the betrayal that my cousin did that shit. She was a hoe. She did that shit. But at the time, I was hurt. I was heartbroken. I hated her. I hated him. I was so pissed. I was pissed off. But what I wanted to touch on is the dangers of, number one, not having certain conversations with your children can lead to what I went through. A bunch of fucking confusion and not knowing that you are being molested and not knowing that you're being touched and groomed and not knowing that certain things and certain situations are not right, they're wrong, and they should not be happening. Not having the conversations about stranger danger. You need to have those conversations as early as possible, as early as your child can comprehend touching on themselves. I know with boys, it happens as soon as they're damn near out of the womb, they touch on themselves. But when they start asking questions and start asking about what their body parts are and what their bodily functions are, I think it's okay to start incorporating some type of conversation, age appropriate conversation with them. Stranger danger, nobody's supposed to touch you in your wee-wee, nobody's supposed to touch your kitty cat. You know what I'm saying? Nobody's supposed to do anything like that. And if somebody touches your no-no, you let somebody know. You know what I'm saying? Things like that. Those conversations are important. Those conversations are imperative. Those conversations I wasn't privy to. I didn't have those conversations because we were starting to be so wrapped up in the church, or we were so wrapped up in the church, and my parents had such a level of trust because they grew up in St. Mary's County and they grew up, you know what I'm saying, in around the area, that, you know, they put a lot of trust in the community because they worked in the community. Everybody knew my daddy. Everybody knew my daddy. And people knew my mom too. Like, they grew up down there. So they had this comfort that they shouldn't have had. And again, talk to your children about not only adults being ones who do violating things, but children as well, because I was violated by a child, a female on female, and her being a child. Like, never in a million years would my parents have ever thought. And I'm almost afraid for them to see this video because they're going to know exactly what I'm talking about or exactly who it is. It's going to start clicking. This is a story that they've never heard before. They don't even know about this. As far as I know, as far as I'm concerned, they don't know about any of this. Except for the boy when I got caught, you know what I'm saying? And even in that instance, it's important to guide your child on dating, and don't always cut the whole conversation in regards to them dating because you feel like they're being too fast, or it's not that time, you ain't old enough for that, this, that, and the third, because your child is going to sneak around. I ended up being sneaky, and that's another thing that I wanted to catch up, make a point of too. I ended up being sneaky because I started to keep so much to myself. I started being sneaky because, again, I was molested and I didn't know how to handle that. I didn't know how to process that. And I didn't have anybody to talk to about that. And so with me not knowing how to process it and me not having anybody to talk to, I operated in too grown up energy that I shouldn't have been operating in. I started to do things that were too grown for my own good. And I could have seriously messed my life up in a different way a lot sooner than the act that ended up happening early. Y'all know my child. So I could have gotten pregnant early. And what's crazy is, like, I think I like the year prior to me losing my virginity, I think that's when I really started my menstrual cycle. So, and I wasn't necessarily privy to your period being the thing that gives that's the indicator that your body is mature enough to have a baby. We didn't have those conversations. That's why I'm like, yo, these conversations are like so imperative to have with your children. And like I said, from the age of they start to ask about their own body parts to present damn day, like to adulthood, so when they feel like, you know, they can navigate on their own. But these conversations have to happen, because if not, you could find yourself, or you if they don't happen, you can find your child having situations that I had, those living in those two types of situations that I did. And you can find your child growing up too fast and not understanding why they are starting to act out, or their attitude is starting to flare, and they don't feel heard, and they feel so misunderstood. They don't feel seen, because that's when all of this stuff started amping up and started really being prevalent feelings within. So, like I said, we are going to unpack so much, but I am going to leave that here. I feel like that is good enough for episode 1. And I think those two stories, they correlate so much that the message is, you know, you get the message, you get the point, right? I had no idea that I was molested and that I was being groomed until I was well into my late 20s, unpacking my childhood traumas. That is sad. And it just goes to show you how I held on to that as a child. I held on to that for almost 20 years before I was able to really unpack that. I know I held it over 15 years. It was almost 20 years before I was able to unpack that, but until I was able to be comfortable enough to open up to somebody and tell somebody everything. And so that's another reason that I'm doing this vlog series, is because it teaches parents that you just never know, and you can't trust just anybody. And you can't not only look at adults, you also have to look at children, adolescent children going into teenage years, when you entrust them around your young children, your young innocent children who are not privy to any of those types of things. So definitely take heed. Let my story be something that, you know, is a conversation starter now for you and your children. Hopefully if nothing like this has happened to you, but if it has happened to you, maybe it's something that you want to unpack as well. We can do that as well. You know, I'm here, I'm a life coach, I'm a transformational coach. So these are the things that I help people with. And so if you would like to reach out to, you know, look to see if I can help you in that aspect, I am here for it. That is what this is for. So I hope that this helped somebody in some way, shape, or form. And again, we have so much more to unpack, y'all. I know this episode 1 is like, what? Like, damn, girl, you starting off with a bang. But hey, that's what we go to chronological order. That's how it happened. So it happened early on. So that's what we had to start with. And that's my earliest traumatic, you know, experience that I can remember anyway. So there you have it. All right, you guys, that is going to do it for episode 1. Hope it wasn't too much for you. And if it triggered you, I really sincerely apologize. And again, maybe it's something that you need to work through. Reach out. I may be able to help you. But until then, or until next time, I'll see y'all later. Bye.